Welcome to the Real Buffs podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Charlie.
And I'm Matt.
And today we are going to be looking at the classic John Hughes film, the one, the only, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Very excited to dive into this movie. This is the quintessential, in my opinion, Thanksgiving movie. It's on like the must viewing every time it comes around this holiday. Maybe I'll watch it for like the days leading up to it, and even the day of, like if I get the time. Obviously Thursday's kind of dominated by football that day, but this is like go-to watching for me.
Interesting. I know I've only ever seen this movie like 3 times, and one of which was like watching it for the show. I just, for some reason, it's not in there for me. Not that it's a bad movie by any means, but I guess I always just kind of forget about Thanksgiving in general, besides like the food and the football, right?
I was going to say, I'm like, can we talk about you forgetting about Thanksgiving for a second?
Like I look forward to the food, and like there's a lot that leads up to it, I guess. And so I just never think to like watch Thanksgiving themed movies. I don't know, because I don't like Charlie Brown, so I don't watch Charlie Brown. And so I don't know, I'm weird.
Well, you do raise an interesting point. Like there aren't a ton of like great Thanksgiving theme movie, but we're going to dive into that in a little bit, actually, because I did come up with a list, and there's some surprising sleepers on that list that I always forget about that are Thanksgiving movies that are really good. We obviously chose this movie because we're filming 2 days after Thanksgiving. We're actually recording right now on the 25th, and this is the 36th anniversary of when the movie was released. It was released in 1987 on the 25th of November. So yeah, we're hitting that 36th anniversary release date. Just to give you, for those of you who haven't seen it, first off, I don't know what you're doing here. Maybe you should go watch the movie first so we don't spoil anything for you. This is something we're going to do that's a little bit newer here on the podcast. We're going to do a quick ChatGPT summary. So this is what ChatGPT spat out to me when I asked for a summary. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is a classic comedy film directed by John Hughes. The story follows an uptight marketing executive, Neil, played by Steve Martin, who is desperately trying to get home for Thanksgiving. His journey becomes hilariously chaotic when he meets bumbling, overly talkative salesman Dell, played by John Candy. Together, they face a series of misadventures involving various modes of transportation as they navigate their way home. Along the way, they form an unlikely friendship amidst the chaos and learn valuable lessons about empathy and understanding. What do we think about this? I feel like the ChatGPT summary nailed this one.
I mean, it's pretty spot on. Yeah. I mean, you have Neil, aka the timeless Steve Martin, who never ages, for one. Number two, he is very uptight in this movie. Very. And then there's just Dell, who John Candy, if you are familiar with his short but exquisite work. Yeah, I mean, he's the bumbling idiot to match the uptight salesman. So yeah, I mean, ChatGPT pretty much nailed it here.
Yeah, it actually does a really good job of summarizing the movie as little words as possible, as I am not capable of doing that. Or at least I'm not capable of trying that. Maybe I am capable of doing it. But yeah, this is one of those where it's like it's just Neil, like you said, Steve Martin does play this guy who is basically, I mean, he's this like uptight guy, but apparently it's based on of John Hughes did as a copywriter for a marketing firm back in the day. But Matt, you said you saw this movie only 3 times here. So where were you the first time you saw this movie?
Honestly, I think it was like on TNT back when I was a kid, and it was just like around the holiday time. I'm just sitting there and it just happened to be on. So I just was like, all right, I was like a teenager and I just mindlessly watched it. Didn't really think too much about it. And then I watched it again kind of recently, a couple times recently, just because I don't think about it. I knew it existed. It's a good movie, but it's for me personally not on like a pantheon of holiday films that I have to watch for some reason. But again, it's not a bad movie. I enjoy it. So I don't really know what happens. I think Thanksgiving as a whole kind of gets sandwiched between watching horror movies and then Christmas movies. And so it's just Thanksgiving as far as like watching movies, it gets forgotten about, A, because there's not a lot of them. And then B, it's football. Football season's going on. And then that's just like what dominates my TV that day is football.
I mean, yeah, that's what dominates everybody's TV on Thanksgiving, I would assume. But this is like one of those films. It's always on in my house around Thanksgiving. I've always sort of seek this movie out during like the holidays. But you raised some interesting points about like the placing of Thanksgiving on like the movie watching schedule of the year. You've got horror films dominating like the month of October there. And then obviously some of the Christmas films that will dominate everybody's viewing in
Well, you also have
December.
the parade too, which takes up 3 hours of Thanksgiving morning, and then you lead right into football as well, because the parade's a big deal in my house.
Well, yeah, you've got the kiddos probably watching the parade, dude. I could give two shits about the parade if I'm being honest.
Actually,
like,
Carrie's big into the parade. The kids don't really care about the parade yet. They might
So
see like the bluey float, right? But the parade's one of those things that Carrie's really big into, and so I'll sit there and just kind of mindlessly watch it, because Wednesday nights typically when you're getting together with family, you're all drinking, so you're typically kind of hungover on Thanksgiving before you kind of rally and start going again.
are you doing stuff with the family the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, or do you go out sometimes? Because like that's a big going out night for people
is.
going to their hometowns. Do you?
Every high school person who never left, it's a big night for them.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like, those people who are coming back home and they just want some bragging rights over the people who stayed local, or to flex a little bit,
I actually, man, this was the first year we got with family in a while. Like being that I was in Idaho for a bit, like we just kind of did Thanksgiving, or I'm actually typically not here on Thanksgiving. So this was the first year we went down and was with family. So we all were getting together and playing games and, drinking like wine and stuff like that.
Nice, man. Yeah. We stayed here in California, and, needless to say, we had this movie on the night before, because the night before, we're actually the ones who host, and my wife is big into like making the bird. She does like this whole like Julia Childs thing, and like deconstructs the bird and everything. It's awesome. But it's a lot of work the night before. So like I'm kind of helping her and then helping her that day. So this is like a perfect movie just for me to like have in on the background and just kind of like watch it as we go. But it's also like, to your point, when you think about Thanksgiving, like this movie's been around for so long. I mean, it came out maybe like a year after I was born. So basically it's like, it's always been around. I can never pinpoint the time I first seen it like all the way through. I know that from days like back in the day, it'd always be on like AMC or TNT or TBS, like one of those stations, and I would always kind of catch it. My dad liked it, so that's probably why like I took a liking to it. Scene that always stuck out to me in this movie that I remembered most as probably a kid when I was first introduced to the movie was like the car scene when they're going the opposite way on the highway. But
oh yeah,
that's like
casually sitting there, it catches on fire, and
yes, I always just remember like my dad pulling me aside like when that scene's going on, because he thought it's hilarious and would always show me that scene. So that's really like it. Other than that, it's just always sort of been around. So I can't pinpoint a specific date and time or moment in my life where it's like I remember watching this movie. But yeah, this is one of the very few Thanksgiving movies, and Thanksgiving movies are in general, it's weird. Like you think about what the holiday is, like where it is in the movie calendar, and also what it represents though. And I think there's like a missed opportunity for filmmakers to make more of these, because they're very much about Thanksgiving's a holiday, very much revolved around family. But it's also like a strictly American holiday too. So you've got like these themes to really like dig into about like the family in America and what it means to be a family in America. And you can really like there's a lot to chew on there. I think that there's some opportunities for filmmakers to kind of dig in on. But yeah, there's just there's a good amount of when you think about like where it is between horror and Christmas, like there's not nearly as many. And obviously horror is almost cheating because it's like just a whole
I was about to
genre.
say there's actually a really good horror movie based on Thanksgiving out right now by Eli Roth that was very much worth the watch. That is going to go into my like Thanksgiving rotation because it was really freaking good. Surprisingly, it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah, my brother said it was really good too, and
good.
I do want to check it out. I might actually go this weekend. But that actually leads me to one of our opening questions here. Is this the best Thanksgiving movie of all time?
I'm going to say yeah. Number one, because like I don't care for Charlie Brown at all. Never liked Charlie Brown. And then aside from that, I can't think of a pure Thanksgiving movie. They might mention Thanksgiving in passing in some movies, but other than that, it's you are right. They tend to. There's a missed opportunity here. You could make a very romantic comedy movie based around Thanksgiving easily. You could make a good heartfelt family story somewhere in there about Thanksgiving, about maybe people trying to come together again and bring their families together, because it is strictly like kind of a American holiday based around family. And then you don't need to do it horror or anything like that, but you could build something there. And aside from that, I couldn't tell you what another Thanksgiving movie is.
So the good thing is that I did compile a list, and you're right. Like it's like they're not the films that really jump to your mind when you think of like a Thanksgiving film. Obviously, looking at the ones we got here, we've got Charlie Brown Thanksgiving. So we've got a movie called Hannah and Her Sister. Another one this is slept on as a Thanksgiving movie is Addams Family Values. And
I do forget that one because Christina Ricci in her Native American outfit. I do forget this one always.
Oh, it's fantastic. And my wife actually turned me on to this one. I've seen this movie like as a kid before, but I totally forgot that this was a Thanksgiving movie. Like these Addams Family movies were a big deal when I was a kid. Yeah. And I just really never revisited them. But revisiting them like last year, she actually turned me on to this, and I was like, holy shit, this is hilarious. I totally forgot how funny these movies are, and they actually hold up pretty well. Just despite the fact that it's like, okay, like I haven't seen them in almost 30 years. But yeah, great Thanksgiving movie. Even though it really doesn't take place on Thanksgiving, they have like that misplaced pageant that's like at a summer camp too.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not even like technically taking place on Thanksgiving. So there's a film. A lot of these, I'll be honest, like I haven't seen, but the ones I have seen, I think are slept on, obviously. And you actually are like, okay, this is kind of like a deep list when you start to think about the Ice Storm, Avalon, She's Gotta Have It, which is the Spike Lee movie. And that's a classic right there. I love Spike Lee. Krisha, which is came out almost like 10 years ago. I want to say in 2015. Home for the Holidays, which is another 90s film. And then another 90s film, this is like one of the more like Al Pacino films, when Al Pacino just became a character of himself, basically. And that's Scent of a Woman, Pieces of April, and then Rocky. Like you think about Rocky, it's actually got one of the biggest moments, like is the Thanksgiving moment where Burt Young just starts freaking out.
Yeah, I guess it counts as a Thanksgiving movie.
Yeah. Burt Young as Paulie. Yeah. So I mean, but the point is like we don't have a ton, and they're not really like they might have these big moments centered around the holiday, but like this might be the best movie, and it's my favorite Thanksgiving movie, and this is aside from the fact that I haven't seen a lot of these on this list, so that might change.
I haven't either.
And that's fair. We've got a lot of digging to do, and we got a lot of time for this podcast. But moving on, John Hughes. This is one of his films that he both wrote and direct. Prolific writer director of the 80s. Really just like captured the essence of the 80s, and especially the teen comedy in that era. This was really his first like adult film, though. during
Yeah.
that, like, based on like, when I say adult film, I don't mean
It's
fucking
purely
porno.
no, yeah, no. It's purely like it takes place as adults because these other movies, Breakfast Club, 16 Candles. I mean, even Home Alone, they're based around like kind of the main characters are teenagers, kids, things like that. Whereas Planes, Trains, Automobiles, this is one of like his few purely R-rated films.
Is it R rated though?
It's
See, I totally
R-rated, yeah.
forget.
Well, because there's that
Is
whole
it?
scene where Steve Martin is, I want the fucking car right fucking now, and that whole sequence, he like rattles off about 10 fucks in a span of 30 seconds, and so yeah, this one's rated R.
I got the exact number, and we'll hit on that later because that's a question. But yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I think when you get to a certain amount of fucks that you say in a film, you gotta give it the old R rating, or at least the MPAA does. But let's just examine John Hughes's like stretch of movies from 1983 to 1990. So it's kind of unbelievable, like the amount of good movies he does in this time. There's a couple misses in here, but I mean, honestly, it's just they're overwhelmingly good. They're overwhelmingly classics of the 80s. So we start off with National Lampoon's Vacation, which he didn't direct, he wrote. But then we got 16 Candles right after that, The Breakfast Club, European Vacation, Weird Science, Pretty in Pink, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Some Kind of Wonderful, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I mean, that right there, if you could have just stopped right there, that's just such a prolific run right there.
Yeah,
It's
this run
unreal.
might put him in like this period of stretch right here. It's probably arguably the greatest stretch for a filmmaker, just because how many of these movies are cult classic films amongst people that are really into movies, but then even casual viewers. I mean, Pretty in Pink's, God, that's extremely popular. 16 Candles, Breakfast Club. Breakfast Club is a timeless movie that is brought up over and over. Ferris Bueller, another movie that's brought up continuously. And then obviously Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of, the Steve Martin and John Candy's top films that they've ever done. And that's saying a lot because Steve Martin has been in a ton of films he feels like he's been around forever. And once again, has never aged.
Yeah, I know. He's always been like that guy who could play anywhere between like 35 and 55. Yeah, even now with like Murders in the Building,
Yes,
which is
God, I love
great,
that
by the way,
show.
on Hulu. Yeah, it's good. I'm not caught up on all of them, so but
Ooh.
it's a great show. But yeah, I mean, he's always kind of looked the same and had this same look, but his comedic chops are amazing. So like he was sort of, or John Hughes saying in this interview, and this is where I got a lot of my production notes from this interview with Vanity Fair. That basically that Steve Martin was sort of like the real first like rock star comedian that would like sell out like arenas and everything like that. So his time in Saturday Night Live and everything like that. But anyways, yeah, just that stretch alone right there is unreal. I mean, I have a hard time like picking out some of my favorites as far as John Hughes movies go during that. And that we haven't even gotten to the point that we have She's Having a Baby, The Great Outdoors, Uncle Buck, Christmas Vacation, and Home Alone to add to that to get to 1990, which is like, a run that he has like a few John Candy movies in. But I mean, John Candy even has a brief character, or a small character, I should say, on National Lampoon's Vacation during the end scene there, as the security guard. It's just even on that scene, like, and I think we'll do that movie eventually too. Like he just knocks it out of the park, and it's hilarious. So, I mean, is this, we got to ask though, even with this prolific run, and like, this is kind of a hard one to do. Is this the best John Hughes movie of all time?
So personally, I'm going to say no, because two of my all-time like favorite movies are Home Alone and Christmas Vacation. So for me, I like this movie, but of all time, I wouldn't say no, because I think that kind of ultimately, bias aside, belongs to either The Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller even, but it's probably Breakfast Club in my opinion, because I think that's the one that is the most popular, the most renowned, all of that kind of stuff of all time as far as John Hughes goes.
I don't know about that. I mean, I think that I don't know if it's the most renowned, but I mean, it's definitely worth it. Like it's my favorite personally too. I think it's the best John Hughes films that, but I also would say like a lot of people would say Ferris Bueller. And I would not, scoff at that
I
whatsoever
don't think
because
if you said any of these movies, I would be like, yeah, no, that makes. I mean, maybe if you honestly like Pretty in Pink isn't his best movie, and I don't think She's Having a Baby or Some Kind of Wonderful are his best movies. But if you really said any of these and was his best film, I wouldn't necessarily argue with you because none of them are particularly bad films subjectively.
I don't know about that. I would push back if somebody said European Vacation was his best film. I'd be
That's
like,
okay. That's fair. European Vacation is kind of like me.
That's like the worst of the vacation movies.
That's the most forgettable. That's the one I honestly always forget about.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny too, like because I was just doing a little bit of research and I totally forgot it's directed by Amy Heckerling too, which I love. I love her as a director. So I was like, oh shit, like she actually directed this movie. But yeah, I would agree. I mean, but this is up there. It's got to be like it's at the very least top 4.
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of people's lists, and like I wouldn't scoff at you if you made an argument that this was 1 or 2. It's so much fun to be around this movie, and it's really one of the more heartwarming ones of this era. So I don't know. It captures something, and it's really like what it has to do more with like the writing and the casting, and obviously having Steve Martin and John Candy who just work so well together on this.
Oh, absolutely. They really do have chemistry that just flows throughout this whole movie. They really do.
Yeah, during production, like they did a lot of improvisation. Obviously, Candy coming from the comedy improv scene.
They're both really two comedic geniuses too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, this film is also a road trip film, and this is sort of one of my favorite like style of movies here. So that the typical road trip film, is this the best road trip film of all time? And like we can dive into it, but here's a solid list of like some of my favorites. And I know that these are probably some of yours as far as road trip films. So we've got Blues Brothers, Dumb and Dumber, Almost Famous, another John Hughes one, National Lampoon's Vacation, Easy Rider, Little Miss Sunshine, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Road Trip, Rain Man, Thelma and Louise, Tommy Boy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna be hard for us to put Planes, Trains, and Automobiles at the top of the road trip list.
Definitely not at the top because
I don't know. It's still kind of like is in a way. It's still just so iconic. But I mean, you really could make a case for any of these. It just depends on like what you're looking for. Obviously, like Thelma and Louise and Little Miss Sunshine, like it may have funny moments, but like they're not really comedic films. I mean, Easy Rider as well too. But the other ones are more, comedy driven films. Even Blues Brothers is even more of like a musical comedy too.
Yeah, it is.
It just shows that like the comedy genre itself is perfect for this sort of buddy road trip style of film.
Well, for sure.
What do you think's the best on this list though?
Honestly, man, it's Dumb and Dumber for me personally. This is my opinion. It's Dumb and Dumber. I love that movie so much. However, there is a good one that was missed, and it's Euro Trip. I think Euro Trip should be up there as far as like good comedies because that's one I really love. Is it the best one? No, I don't think it's the best one. But when we're talking about road trip movies, Euro Trip for me is always on that list because there's so many quotable lines from that film that just stand out to me. And so I would add that one. But yeah, to me, it's Dumb and Dumber.
Scotty doesn't know.
He doesn't.
No, he doesn't know. I wouldn't disagree with like Dumb and Dumber being up there. I mean, Dumb and Dumber's always been one of my favorite films since I was a little kid. I still think it's like one of the funniest films I've ever seen. Yeah. You want to talk about a year that somebody had? Just go look at Jim Carrey's 1994.
Oh, dude.
But yeah, I mean, all of these are just unreal as far as movie goes. Rain Man, another one that's kind of like not a comedy movie, but definitely has its funny moments just because of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise doesn't play like a funny character, but when he plays a serious character and you put him in like these funny moments, and it can be good.
Yeah.
With him and Dustin Hoffman. Anyways, this is it's I'm not gonna lie though, it's really hard for me not to put this is easily in my top two, I think.
That's fair. I know. I
And
think that's definitely fair.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, like Blues Brothers, I'm lukewarm on Blues Brothers. I always kind of have been. Almost Famous, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which always will have a special place in my
Oh
heart.
yeah.
And even Tommy Boy, which I feel like Tommy Boy is so directly influenced from this movie. It really is. Like you think about the two characters, they're in the same boat, but you got like sort of the bumbling oaf salesman and sort of the more serious one. But you're just taking, the actors of Farley and Spade and replacing John Candy and Steve Martin with Chris Farley and
It's hard to top
and
David Spade and Chris
Yeah.
Farley's chemistry as well, because they had those run-in movies together, and they kind of just were the same in my head, like just PB&J.
They also had like their time together on SNL.
Yeah.
So they had a lot more time to work together and just always have this connection. Spade with his like dry humor, and obviously Chris Farley being able to turn it up to 9. But the key is that you have both John Candy and Chris Farley, and they both just have this sort of warmth to them too.
Yeah.
Like there's this warmth to these actors that they can portray in their characters, and it really, like, that's what sets them apart from and allows us as an audience to connect with them. Because when we look at the movie, like, and especially in this one, Del Griffith, the character of Del Griffith is, Stephen Martin's not wrong for finding him annoying. I'm not gonna lie, if I encountered somebody like that on a trip home, God help me.
Especially when everything's going wrong as it is.
Thank God. Like, I would have left that person cold a long time ago. I wouldn't have even said 2 words to them. That's just the type of traveler I am. I don't talk to people, so.
I don't either.
All right, well, let's get into some of the production here. So most of my research actually came from this Vanity Fair article that was released last year in honor of the 35th anniversary of the film coming out. So it went back and it had some interviews with people, and obviously some interviews with John Hughes and John Candy before they had passed. So these were kind of older articles that they picked some things that they talked about the movies from. So Bill Brown, who is an associate producer / second unit director, reflects and says, I remember going out to dinner at Ivy at the Shore in LA with Hughes on like a Wednesday night. And he goes, I've got this idea. And he was just sort of pitching the idea of the movie. This was a Wednesday night dinner, just casual, sitting around talking about it. The following Tuesday, it was greenlit by Picture. It was a greenlit picture at Paramount. So it was just right, that's how quick. Yeah. That's just how quick that worked. And John Hughes, a famously prolific writer. The movies, and I alluded to this earlier, the movie is based off an incident that actually happened to John Hughes. He was an advertising copywriter, set out from New York to Chicago on Thanksgiving weekend, and after a 5-day delay, ended up in Phoenix, Arizona via Wichita, Kansas. So yeah, that's what happened, and he's kind of taken this experience and running with it. And apparently there was this old guy who was a salesman who had been on the road for years, and he knew everything about this kind of situation. And Hughes kind of hung on him and was so impressed by the guy's understanding of the situation. So that's where you get like the two characters coming from. It's just his experience right there. But this, this was written pretty quickly, so you could tell that Hughes just had this way about him where he would marinate on ideas, and when he got to writing him, he just wrote it very quickly. So just to give you some context, when they were thinking about this movie, like I said before, he was having this meeting in LA, like casual meeting on a Wednesday, and he wrote the script over a weekend. That's it.
It I do my best work as well when it's down to the wire, but it's not a long movie, nor does it need to be. And there's a lot that happens, but there's also not a lot that happens. So I think it kind of works in the context of you can't even tell it was written in a weekend and that production was generally kind of rushed. But if you kind of look back and think about it after hearing that, you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, Hughes did this with a lot of his movies. They were all
Yeah.
We're going to go back. I mean, shocker. This isn't going to be the only John Hughes film we do on this podcast. So spoiler alert for all you guys. We just listed off all these gems. We're going to get to more of them. But this is something, Matt, as we go along here, we're going to keep finding out about John Hughes, that he wrote it in like 2 days, 3 days.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he wrote 16 Candles in like a night or something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, this was one of those where it's like he wrote it very quickly. And yeah, production was kind of rushed on this, but it's a short film, but they did leave a lot on the cutting room floor, I found in my research. So there are some scenes, and you kind of tell, like, think about the scene, obviously, with Del and Neil in the hotel scene, or the motel scene at first. Like, you've got some questions as an audience. You're kind of like, okay, how did all this stuff like get in the bathroom? Like, what's going on here? It's a little disjointed when you're watching it. It seems like I'm not with the characters, or like something happened, because John Candy's got all the shit all around the hotel bathroom, and I'm wondering, I'm like, well, how did he get in there? They got to cut like a scene that obviously happened. And when doing some of the research, the editor actually said, like, yeah, there was like almost 45 minutes of them being at that hotel, but they had just gotten on the road, so it's like you had to cut down that scene. And obviously they kept the important parts in it. But yeah, they were really up against it production wise. Paramount greenlighted the picture pretty quickly, but there was a catch. They wanted it in theaters by Thanksgiving, which only gave Hughes 9 months to shoot, cut, and complete the picture, a process that typically took more than a year. So,
which is impressive to everybody on this crew too, to get it done in 9 months.
Yeah. And I found out actually is that he used a lot of the same crew from She's Having a Baby. So they had used a lot of the same crew from that to help that. I guess the crew is very loyal to him. But they were also up against the clock because there was a looming Directors Guild Association strike coming as well. And one of the other difficult parts about shooting this film in that 9 month span is that they were chasing the snow. They shot this late in the winter season. They had to go from I think a lot of this was actually filmed in Buffalo, New York, if I'm not mistaken. So they were chasing it in Buffalo. They were chasing it in Chicago, Indiana, I think, as well. So going through a lot of different places to kind of chase down the snow and make sure they've got the right shots for this, because it was obviously crucial to the story. 85-day shoot for a 2-character comedy movie as well. Typically, then this is coming from the editor, Paul Hirsch. He says normally a 2-character comedy, you'd shoot 36 days, 40 days, 85 days is unheard of. 85 days is what you schedule Mission Impossible or something, he said. Yeah. I mean, they didn't have to do any stunts or anything like that. I mean, I don't know. Actually, John Candy and it must have been driving that car between those 2 trucks, I bet. Oh,
that would have been so much fun to do too.
Well, if it was Tom Cruise, it would have been him doing it.
Oh, so. Yeah. He would have ran into the truck head on.
Does his own stunts. Absolutely. Yeah, he probably would have. And he probably would have survived because Tom Cruise is an alien.
Yes.
All right, cool. Box office wise, very good numbers, actually. This did 46 million. It did in the domestic box office on an estimated $15 million budget, which pretty impressive.
Pretty good for a comedy film too, coming out around Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's around. It's around. If we were to take that and put in today's dollars, inflation calculator, it's around 150 million.
Yeah.
So really good numbers. It did. critical reception, it was very overwhelmingly positive. Actually, when I was digging through some of the reviews, it was hard for me to find a good one from a really top known critic. So just going to use this Roger Ebert one because he actually loved it. And Roger Ebert was never the best at sort of judging comedies, but
Right.
I think when a comedy had heart like this one, he could see through it and really appreciate it for what it was. So this is what Roger Ebert said about it. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is founded on the essential natures of its actors. It is perfectly cast and soundly constructed, and all else flows naturally. Steve Martin and John Candy don't play characters, they embody themselves. That's why the comedy, which begins securely planted in the twin genres of the road movie and the buddy picture, is able to reveal so much heart and truth. Very well said by Raja.
Yeah.
And I tend to agree with him on this.
I definitely do.
One thing I wanted to ask you when we kind of dive into this is look at the movie is the suitcase, Dell's suitcase. Like, first off, have you seen the trailers like of recutting this movie into being like a horror movie with Dell's suitcase?
No, I haven't actually.
Oh, dude, it's phenomenal. You got to watch it. It's because you can make a horror movie out of it. It can seem like there's certain things that Steve Martin says as a character, or Neil says his character during the film, that he's talking about being stuck with this strange man and everything like this. When he's talking to his wife and the suitcase, and you putting some ominous music towards it, you can absolutely make like a phenomenal horror trailer out of it.
Yeah, no, I can see this.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this, and this is probably just because I mostly just sort of watch this film as like, I don't know, it's fun. A lot of times I have it on in the background and like maybe we'll just stop for certain scenes. But but I never really thought of like what the suitcase represented. And it obviously, to me, it represents Dell's baggage that he's carrying.
Oh, yeah, that's
like,
what I would say.
Yeah, it's I mean, well, it's literally baggage, but
it's always bothered me that we never see what's actually inside of it. But
yeah, I mean, really, like, I don't know if they show something like that in the shower curtain scene. It could be shower curtain ring scene where he's selling them. I don't think they really do, but they might, and I just missed it. But this is, yeah, it's one of those where it's clearly meant to symbolize something besides what it is. So, and it's clearly like this grief that he's holding within of like the loss of his wife that we find out later in the movie.
8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, it's one of those things I never really thought of. And then I took sort of like a more critical eye when watching it this time. And I was like, oh shit, like it's meant to represent something here, because you think about the shot at the end and it's Steve Martin helping him carry that. And that's sort of like the idea that or Neil, I should say, helping him carry that. And it's just the idea that that basically, like grief is something that, is help. It can really help when you have people there to kind of carry you through it too. I thought was great. Like, it was a good use of a film or the prop in the film to represent something more than it is, and just elevate it a little bit more. Those sort of things, I think, elevate the movie from what it really is.
Right. No, I agree. To me, it's definitely the symbolization of he's been carrying this weight, because you see him in the car once it's burned outside in the snow talking to his wife, and then come to find out she's been gone for 8 years and he's still holding it around. And it explains a lot of his character motives too, is like he's just a lonely guy. And that's kind of what this suitcase to me forever is kind of going to symbolize. And again, I hate that we never saw what was in it, but I think that's the purpose, is it's more symbolic to show than anything else.
Agreed. Cool. Let's get into the award sections, and I'm actually excited because I added a couple of new categories on this. So best scene. I mean, this we've got a few for a contender in this. I actually love the cab race scene at the beginning when they get out, and we got Kevin Bacon just making a
I was
small
gonna say, was
cameo in
that
it.
Kevin Bacon at first?
Yeah.
Because I thought so. It was really quick, and I was like, that's Kevin Bacon, isn't it? And then I just forgot about it. But yes, that is Kevin. Okay, good.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon famously just done. She's having a baby, and John was telling him about this project, John Hughes, and basically Kevin Bacon was like, "Oh, I got to be in this. It's like I'll do whatever." And they found a way to get him in and this play this character, and just
Amazing.
perfect. Kevin Bacon have that close up on his eyes and those high cheekbones and like smirking. I'm like, oh, there's nobody better to play somebody like that in just a brief moment and just knock it out of the park. Maybe Nicolas Cage, but like Nicolas Cage wasn't Nicolas Cage at this point. So
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, for sure.
not in 1987.
No, not
sure.
yet.
I love that, but the first hotel scene is that's sort of another contender, I think, on this as far as best scene goes. You not only get the comedy and the iconic like takedown that Neil does of Dell, being like, I could tolerate any insurance seminar because I was with Dell Griffith.
Yes.
Absolutely crushes his soul. Like he's like, didn't you get the cue that I was reading the vomit bag when you were talking to me? Oh my God. It's perfect. I love Steve Martin as an asshole.
I do too. He just works so well naturally because he seems like, nowadays he's like such a nice, warming guy, and that's kind of who he is. But playing the asshole just works so well.
Yeah. I think this is one of like the few or one of the first films there where he does sort of play that asshole. He usually is sort of that heartwarming guy, like in a comedy or a family comedy, but it's different for this one. And I like him. I like him in both, obviously,
yeah.
But for this one, it's just something different. And I think because of that, he really dials it up a little bit because this is sort of a different character for him.
Yeah.
Next scene I have, and this is sort of clumped together, is Dell selling the shower curtain rings into the breakup scene where they're at like the diner and they decide to go their separate ways, into Neil not getting the rental, which is one of the greatest fucking tirades I've ever heard in a film. It's classic. So this brings me back to the question that we had asked earlier, that you said earlier. Do you know how many times Neil says fuck in that scene where he's going off on the car rental receptionist?
I thought it was like 13, but it's definitely more than that. It's probably like 20.
You're close when you say 20, but if we're going Price is Right rules, you're over. It's actually 19.
Ooh, man.
Yeah, I was watching it last night. I'm like, oh, I got to count how many he says. So that was a lot.
That's incredible. It was it was like a minute long scene, and it was perfect.
Oh, so good.
To me, honestly, that's my favorite scene. That I'm giving that one best scene goes to the tirade scene, just because the way it wraps up. Well, I guess you're fucked. Just perfect.
You're fucked.
That was my favorite scene.
With the same character, or the same actress who's actually in Ferris Bueller's. She's Grace in that. Yeah, she's good. Anyways, that's another great one. And then obviously we've got another great scene, which I alluded to this one being one of my favorites, is the car scene where they get turned around and they're going the opposite way.
Yeah,
First starts off with
going the wrong way.
No, it first starts off with a mess around where John Candy's just rocking out to Ray Charles, which is a good movie moment in and of itself.
Yep.
Then he gets he throws his cigarette out. It's just it's a slow build to that scene is perfect into the crescendo of them going the wrong way on the highway. But he's doing that. He is smoking his cigarette while he's listening to the song. He goes to throw it out. Obviously, it doesn't go out the window. It gets in the back seat, making the car get a little bit hotter. He wants to take off his jacket. It gets stuck, which is a fucking nightmare.
Yes.
If that would happen to me, that would be like my biggest nightmare. So goes into that, and because of that, he trying to get out. He gets the car turned around and everything. But yeah, and then obviously going the wrong way on the highway. I fucking love that scene.
He's just drunk. Oh yeah, you're going the wrong way. No, oh yeah,
Yeah.
just drinking.
Oh, she's drunk. How would they know where we're going? Yeah, how would they know?
That was a good scene.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I I think for me, it's the first hotel scene is the best scene because we not only get like some good comedic moments between the two, we also get that really heartfelt speech by John Candy's character, Del Griffith, who just it's so iconic, and he really just conveys the emotion of the character in that, and is so genuine. I mean, he even says it, and he's like, I'm the real deal. What you see is what you get. I thought like that was like the whole movie within that scene is you've got Neil, who's just being a cynical asshole. And then you got Del, who has his problems, but he's being a genuine person. So you're definitely
I'm still saying the car scene. Yeah, for me, I don't know why. This the comedic timing of it all works for me.
When you say the car scene, because that doesn't really narrow it down in this movie.
I'm sorry. When he's trying to get the rental, to me, it's still when he's trying to get the rental and goes on his tirade.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a good one too. But I'll stick with the hotel. What age best in this movie? The performances, 100%. Like aged beautifully.
Performances, they still age. Again, Steve Martin, John Candy. John Candy's kind of immortalized as playing this character, and for me, it's the performances that absolutely age the best because they're so good. It shouldn't be as good for what it is, but I think you don't have this movie without the two of them delivering the type of performance that we get. And if it was anybody else, it would have been not as iconic, in my opinion.
No, it wouldn't have been. Candy has so much sentimentality to him as a comedic actor. He's sort of like, he's sort of like if you were to take the elements of sort of like our bigger like comedic acts, I mean bigger like they're bigger guys like John Candy, John Belushi, Chris Farley. I think John Candy is sort of like the perfect embodiment of those guys where it's like those guys had maybe a little bit of over top physical comedy. John Candy had just this sentimentality about him that was that was really just like made him feel like an everyman and felt like he could be your uncle. So yeah, having him and then having Steve Martin, who is great, but it's also like the side characters in this are perfectly cast. Like all of the performances are great. And we'll get into some of that as far as like, pound for pound of who's good in this. Cause like we've got some good ones in this. But yeah, the performances, the sentimentality, I think is another good one. Like we go into the 80s where it's like that sort of thing can work. And then we get into the 90s where, everything sort of got this cynical vibe to it that doesn't jive with sort of like, I don't know, what our values or things we value in a movie and out of our characters. Like we don't sort of have that. But I think that does well. What about what did travel in general? I think it aged pretty well in this.
I think it aged well because it's still such a nightmare. God,
yeah,
especially with flights getting canceled at the way they are these days. Yeah, that hasn't changed. It's aged perfectly.
And then I also said Dell's sales skills aged pretty good on this.
I showed shower curtain rings.
Yeah, I forget what he says. Is like. He says it was like, oh, these are so-and-so shower curtain rings. Yeah. He sells them his earrings to the girls too. I'm like, oh, this guy's hilarious. I love him. What age is the worst? Airline travel?
You could argue it aged both best and worst, but airline travel still sucks and it's still a nightmare. Especially like again with all the cancellations. But I'm going to say that one has still aged the best, more so than aging the worst.
Well, it's also, maybe I should have specified this. Also, like pre 9/11 airline travel.
Oh,
You don't
yeah.
get to get to the airport at 5:56 and make your plane anymore. That
You
ain't
don't just
happening.
walk right up to the gate anymore at all. No.
No, those
It's
days.
crazy that there's a whole generation or two that don't really understand that concept.
I mean, I think we barely understand it. Like I was 14 when that happened. So
Yeah, I was 11.
there's only like a handful of flights that I took before then. So I barely remember it.
Yeah, that's true. I barely remember it too. And I did I traveled a bunch, but yeah, there's just this whole like concept of just running up, walking your loved ones to the gate and seeing them off that just doesn't exist at all. So it's like a time capsule watching these movies.
Yeah, it really is. It is. Because also like this movie wouldn't exist today because you've got cell phones, you've got Uber, the ability to travel. That's why I said it was what aged the best is like the ability to travel is it's a lot easier for us. There's a lot less things we've got to do. It's more at our fingertips with smartphones. So it just allows us to get access. Doesn't mean it still doesn't suck. It does.
Oh, it absolutely does.
But at the same time, it's much easier for us to get by and do those things.
Yeah.
Also, what age the worst? Homophobia. A little bit with the
yeah.
yeah. That might be what age the worst. And then I always said Neil's treatment of the workers in the travel industry.
Oh yeah,
between
big time
between the flight attendant and our E. McClurg's character, the car rental receptionist, which is what she's called. She doesn't have a name in the film. So yeah, his treatment of them, even though it's like he's got every right to be mad, and I get it. Like you bump me out of first class, and you're being like that. I'd be a little bit peeved too.
I mean, he has pretty much every right to kind of be pissed off, I would say.
He's just going about it in the wrong way. He doesn't know how to talk to people, and was just kind of the point of the movie where he gets a character like Dell who's into sales and just knows how to treat people.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair.
What do you say age the worst?
I'm going to go with, obviously the homophobia ages the worst. It's just different time periods, right? And it doesn't work in today's world. Like you can't do that. Yeah,
exactly. And I would say that's probably the worst. Standout performance. Who do we got? I'd say the main one obviously is John Candy.
Yeah, I mean, arguably it's John Candy and Steve Martin. I think it's 1A, 1B because I think, again, without one, you don't have the other. And they just kind of mesh into one for me. So I would, if I had to choose one, I'm going to say John Candy just because there's periods where he really knows how to bring the emotional weight. And he does that really well, like sitting in the car and just different aspects of that. But he can also turn up the funny to 11 if he has to. And so if I had to choose one, it would be John Candy. Yeah,
it's definitely Candy for me. I mean, I don't even think there's much of a debate on this one. Not to say that Steve Martin's not great in that. It's just John Candy's at a different level. And I think this is probably this and Uncle Buck are his two best performances.
Yeah.
As an actor.
Yeah. Without a doubt.
Pound for pound though. I've got two of them, but like we've got so many good like known people who are in this, obviously, that are in the movie very briefly. We got Kevin Bacon, who we just mentioned before this. But there's two that I think stand above the rest. One is Dylan Baker as Owen. He's like the guy who picks them up from the hotel, him and his wife. He is on the screen for maybe 3 minutes, if that. And I am dying laughing at just like the shit he says. He's playing this obnoxious guy driving a truck, and just the things he says. He's like about his wife. He's like, she may be skinny, but she's strong. Her first baby came out sideways. She didn't scream or nothing. That fucking line kills me every time.
It does.
Oh, man.
To me, though, it's easy. This one's a no-brainer. Then I guess you're fucked.
Edie McClurg.
Yep.
Oh, she's so good.
Without
she's
a doubt.
So good.
That's my pound for pound right there. And it's that one's firm right there.
You think so, dude?
Oh, without a doubt.
You know, probably the first like 10 times I saw this movie, I would have agreed with you. But I just have so much of an appreciation for Dylan Baker as Owen now. Like, I don't know why, but like how he starts off, he's like, he spits and he wipes his hand with it and goes to shake Steve Martin's hand. And they actually planned that out. That was like an improvised thing because they knew Steve Martin would get grossed out by it. And sure enough, he was.
Yeah. Which is fair. I would be too.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be? All right, so you're going with Edie. I'm going with Dylan. We're splitting on this one.
There you
go. Music moments. Back in Baby's Arms. Obviously, the scene where they wake up together, snuggling in the hotel in the first hotel scene. That I always like that one. Meet the Flintstones when they're on the bus, and John Candy breaks out into the Meet the Flintstones song.
That's a good one.
To me, there's only one though, and it's right before the truck scene where they go the wrong way in the highway. It's the mess around.
Yeah, that would have been my choice just because it builds up so perfectly to then they go into pure chaos.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Not to mention, like, the mess around doesn't get used a ton in movies, or at least I don't think it does, but it's a good song. I don't think
it does at all.
So it's just got it hits perfectly, and it's a perfect song to build to that crescendo and something in 1987. Like, could I see John Candy or Del Griffith like jamming out to that song? Absolutely. I could. Double feature. So we mentioned a few of these before because of the idea of the road trip movie. And then I got a few as far as like John Candy movies, but I think a good recommendation for a feature or a double feature on this one would be this and Uncle Buck. Just because John Candy like really carries, I think
that's the only
he carries really Uncle Buck.
Honestly, it's Uncle Buck in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Like, that's, to me, there's only one right answer, and it's Uncle Buck.
Yeah. What about something like Dumb and Dumber though?
Yeah, it doesn't fit. I don't have Dumb and Dumber. To me, doesn't fit the mold. I don't have Dumb and Dumber. I don't see that being is it a great movie? Of course, but Dumb and Dumber I think fits more with something else. Whereas I think Uncle Buck, because of the John Candy aspect, there's something warm and inviting about John Candy, and I can't get enough of. So I have to go Uncle Buck. 9 as your double feature, without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Also, what about Home Alone? Home Alone, I think another different kind of movie where it's like it is a travel movie, it's a holiday movie. I just and you do have John Candy who like is in his
looking at him as horror movies, and maybe
yeah. Well, I mean, did John Candy obviously in Home Alone as well, and kind of knocks it out of the park. Like his scene, we can talk about that when we get to Home Alone someday, but his scene in Home Alone is hilarious. Oh. He's talking about how they left their kid in like a funeral parlor. He's like, oh yeah, he was fine. You know, he didn't talk for about 2 weeks. That's one of those where it's like, as an adult, that scene gets so much funnier for me. Yes. And you know, it's improvised for him. So yeah. Yeah, I would say it's either Uncle Buck or Home Alone, just because Uncle Buck, you get John Candy kind of carrying the movie, and he's just the focal point of both of them. Home Alone, more so it just being a holiday travel movie, a John Hughes movie, not directed by John Hughes, but it was written by John Hughes. It was actually directed by Chris Columbus, who did, which Harry Potter film he did?
It wasn't the first one, was it?
It was.
It was the first one? Okay. I thought so.
Yeah. Sorcerer's Stone. Oh, actually, let's double check that. I think
I got this. I'll check it up real quick while you go into your new category.
Yeah. The new category. So I thought this would be a fun new category. If we turn this film into a porno, what would we call it? One of them that I got is Those Aren't Pillows. I mean,
I don't know. That's a good one. That's a good question. The Canadian Mounted that you have on here is good. That one's
Yeah,
my
well,
favorite.
that's a good one because it's obviously referencing to the smut book that Del Griffith's character is reading when Neil first sees him at the airport. So that was sort of the other one. I thought another one was when Del's making fun of Neil for playing with his balls.
Oh yeah, you touch your balls a lot.
Yeah. But there's this line that he says, like, Neil goes, well, you know what I wish? And he's like, I forget what he says before that. He's like, there's some, he's basically saying like, there's like, you know what I wish? There's some things that you do or whatever. And, I don't know. He just says another couple balls and an extra set of fingers. And that line just stuck out to me as a good porno line. So,
Yeah.
But I don't know. Which one do you think it would be best?
Let's do another couple balls.
Another couple balls and an extra set of fingers.
Yeah, I like that one.
That's a good one. I do like the Canadian Mounted, and then those Arm Pillows. Yeah, we're gonna have to keep doing this one from now on, just because
I like this one. This is a fun one.
Exactly. And if we're not having fun on this podcast, then I don't know what we're doing here. Who wins the day?
Oh, it's John Candy.
Yeah.
In my opinion, John Candy. This one kind of cements his legacy to me. I know we have Uncle Buck and the other films that he's in, but for me, like, this cements his legacy as one of the greatest, although short-lived, like, comedic actors of all time, because he shows his range really well in this film. Again, I talk about he talks about his wife and just the seriousness that he can play while also playing this bumbling idiot, and it just works really well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's John Candy for a lot of the same reasons that you said. This is also a pretty impressive year for him. He did Spaceballs and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in the same year. So he plays Barf and Del in the same year.
I like that. That's right. I totally forgot about that. Spaceballs came out the same year.
Yeah. He's the winner of this. I think he could make an argument for John Hughes just because they accomplished and made this movie in a tight timeline that shot way over the shooting schedule.
Yeah.
You think 35 to 40 days and it's shot for 85 days.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still got it out in time. So you could make an argument that he kind of won the day, but I'm going to have to, I'm diverting. Usually I'm a director guy, but I'm going with John Candy on this one. He will always have a special place in my heart.
Agreed.
I remember where I was when I heard that he died, and I was sad. I was like one of those things where I was like, oh, because I was young. I mean,
yeah.
When he passed away, it was like the early 90s. So
yeah, agreed, man, for sure.
Awesome. Did we find out which Curse Columbus?
It was the first two Harry Potter films, Chambers.
I thought so.
Sorcerer's Stone. Yes.
I thought so, because there's that Christmas moment, and that's what kind of tipped me off. I'm like, oh, this reminds me of Home Alone a little bit. And then I looked, like, that's why
I always use these movies as like my gap between if anything, Harry Potter gets rewatched, that dead space in between Halloween and Christmas most of the time for me.
Okay. I watched it. Yeah, I only watched it the first time a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So all of them. But that's when I met my wife. She's like, I can't date you seriously. She's like, I can't take you seriously unless you watch these or read these. And I'm like, all right.
She's right.
Yeah, I know. Anyways, that wraps up our discussion here on Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So really great film. Great to revisit. Always great to revisit. I plan on watching this again next Thanksgiving. But we are coming up to the Christmas season. So our next movie is going to be a little movie starring Will Ferrell and one of our national treasures, Jon Favreau, as director.
Anniversary, man.
20-year anniversary of Elf. So excited to dive into this one as one of our last couple podcasts for the year.
Let's do it.
Awesome. Well, I'm signing off. This is The Real Buffs. I'm one of your hosts, Charlie.
And I'm Matt.
So long, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Welcome to the Real Buffs podcast.